Hi folks. Today I'd like to give you a quick tutorial on how to draw causal loop diagrams in Vensim PLE from Ventana Systems. If you're interested in stock and flow diagrams and actually doing system dynamics modeling simulations using Vensim or some other tools as well, I have other videos on that I encourage you to check out. But today I'm just focusing on causal loop diagrams. Now I will be using Vensim PLE version 9.11, but in this video, I'm using what's referred to as the old sketch interface. As of Vensim 9.11, maybe a little bit earlier than that, I'm not sure, they started to introduce a new sketch tool that they actually default to on new installs. But I've noticed that many of my students, when they're using the new sketch tool, which looks a little bit different than what the image you see shared here, when they're using the new sketch tool in either Windows or Mac, sometimes when they do something as simple as drawing another variable, Vensim crashes. Those students have had better luck switching back to the old sketch tool. So if you're having that problem, then you go under Tools, and if you're using the new sketch, under it will have the bottom here, switch to old sketch. Because I'm already in the old sketch mode, it says switch to new sketch beta. On a Windows machine, if you do switch to old sketch, then immediately it'll flip to the old sketch. On a Mac machine, if you do switch to old sketch, it'll pop up a little dialog that says you have to restart Vensim in order to get the old sketch, in which case you can go to the Vensim menu, say quit Vensim, and then the next time you restart Vensim, you'll get the old sketch. Overall, there's not many differences between old sketch and new sketch, aside from an updating of the way these icons look across the top and the sides. However, this toolbar down at the bottom has some slightly different functionality in New Sketch. And there's some other selection options available in New Sketch when you're interacting with things, trying to do batch edits of things on the canvas that are a little nicer in New Sketch. And I show a couple of those features in a separate video I have on drawing CLDs using New Sketch. But Old Sketch and New Sketch otherwise really aren't that different. Okay, so if I want to draw a causal loop diagram, the example that I'm going to give you here would be a fish population, let's say in a fishery. And so I'm going to need to draw three variables. I'm going to do a number of fish, I'm going to do new fish per year, and I'm going to do deaths per year as my three variables that I'm going to draw here and show how they interrelate. I'm going to mainly be using the variable tool here, which has an icon that has an A in it. That A stands for auxiliary. I'll be using the arrow tool for the informational links or causal links. And then I'll also be using the comment tool. That will be what we'll actually do to label the loops as positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. We might occasionally use the delete tool to delete things off the canvas or off the view. And then we might also use the move size tool to, as it says, move or size. The move size tool also can be used to select a bunch of different options or a bunch of different elements on the canvas so that you can export them to other things, you can delete them, you can make changes in batch and so on. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to click on variable, and in the middle of the view or the canvas here, I'm going to add number of fish. And so I just clicked somewhere and typed number of fish. Now that creates what is something by default, I think is in 12-point font under Times New Roman. That might be fine for you. When I'm projecting up onto a screen for my students, it's far too small. I can go in and change the font for just that individual variable, but I really want to do it for all the variables that I use. So what I'm going to do to change the default font is I am going to right-click on empty space in the canvas, and that brings up the view defaults, which allow me to change the size of all of the text here. Now, if you can't right-click, maybe your mouse doesn't have a right-click, on a Mac, you can hold down Control and left-click, and it brings up the view defaults. Alternatively, if you've got a trackpad, like I've got over here, then sometimes right-click is actually accessed by using two fingers to click on the trackpad. Now, if none of that works for you, you can go to the View menu and then say Font and Colors, and it'll bring up the same thing. So regardless of how you do it, you get this font and colors up. If I go to size here, I can change it to say 24, hit OK, and then it makes that much bigger. Now notice that it kept the same amount of space, and so when I made the text bigger, it had to wrap. If I'm using the move size tool, then I see that handle pops up. If I'm also using the variable tool, so let's say if I do the move size tool, I see that handle pop up. If I use the variable tool, sometimes it pops up and sometimes it doesn't. That's one of the downsides of new sketch. But if I mouse over the corner of this, where that handle popped up into the move size, then I'm able to grab that handle and then move it around, or if I can manage to get it, I can actually resize it to make it smaller or bigger to affect the wrapping. All right, so that's number of fish. The other variable that I wanted to add was new fish per year, kind of a birth rate. And then I'm also going to add deaths per year. Now, if I was doing this for real, I probably would want to be more detailed about what's causing those deaths, like if it's food limitation or so on and so forth. And but I'm just trying to keep things simple to show you how to draw a basic causal loop diagram. So I draw those three in there, and now I need to draw their causal links. And so I'm going to go to the arrow tool. The way the arrow tool works is if I click on any variable, it's going to anchor that one end of the arrow to that variable, and it's going to wait for me to click on the second variable to anchor the arrowhead to it. And then it'll draw a straight line between them with one of these handles in between. If I mouse over that handle and wait for the little hand to show up, then I can grab that by left clicking and drag it up and down to bend that arrow and do a nice arc. Again, if I can also use the move size tool to interact with that. Now, if I go back into the arrow tool here, that just draws the arrow, but it doesn't annotate the arrow to tell me what type of causal link it is. In order for me to do that, I can mouse over that handle, and instead of left clicking to drag it up and down, I can right click, and it'll bring up these options for how it should draw the arrow. And so in this case, I know that if I increase my number of fish, each of those fish has more opportunities to reproduce. And so that will also increase the new fish per year. So an increase on one end of the arrow causes an increase on the other end of the arrow. Two increases, so those move in the same direction. So that is a positive link. Depending on your convention, you might also label it, or you might instead label it as an S for same, because things move in the same direction. They have both of those options available. You can also put other labels that you want here, though we normally just stick to plus and minus or S and O. And we usually don't intermix those. So all pluses and minuses are all S's and O's. And so if I just do that, it draws a line with a plus on the inside. That's a little ugly. It looks a little cramped. So I'm going to go back in and right click on that. And I want to say that I want to position the polarity mark on, near the arrowhead, not near the handle, on the outside. And if I wanted to, I could change the color. It's the default color, which happens to be blue. I could also change font characteristics for that label. So I can change the color of the label, the size of the label, and so on by clicking on this font. But I'm going to leave them by their defaults. So that's our first link. Now I'm going to draw the feedback link. So now this just popped up a box here, so teachable moment. If you don't save things in Vensim, it's constantly going to ask you if you want to save to enable automated backup. I'm going to click yes here, which is the same thing as going file and save as, and I'm just going to save this thing. I've already done a tutorial for the new sketch, and so I'm going to call this tutorial old sketch. And then that way it's not going to bother me as I go. All right, so where were we? I'm drawing the link from new fish per year to number of fish. So I'm going to click on new fish per year, click on number of fish, and grab it, drag it down to create a nice arc. Now I need to label the polarity. If I increase the new fish per year, then I'm going to immediately increase the number of fish. Now I say immediately because that reminded me that there's one other annotation that I might want to put on this original arrow that I drew back this way. If I increase the number of fish, they don't all start reproducing immediately. So if I was to compare these two links, this backward link from number of fish to new fish per year is much slower than this forward link from new fish per year back to number of fish. So I might want to add a delay mark to that backward link from number of fish to new fish per year. And I do that by right-clicking on it, and then I select this delay mark up here. And when I do that, it puts this little, right on the handle, it puts this little mark, these kind of two vertical bars or kind of a capacitor looking symbol. And then that indicates that this causal link is much slower than this causal link that doesn't have the delay. Now, I do need to annotate this one. So I'm going to annotate it as a plus on the outside again. It's a plus again here because it moves in the same direction. New fish per year gives me an increase. If I increase the new fish per year, I get an increase in the number of fish. Now, on the other side here, if I increase the number of fish, how does that affect deaths per year? Well, increasing the number of fish, each fish has a mortality risk. And so if I have more fish, I'm going to get more deaths per year. Now, if I were to model things explicitly about food limitation and so on, then it's probably even more complicated, or there's probably even worse than that, because I have more fish in the fishery, there's probably less fish available per fish. And so the deaths per year definitely is going to go up if I get more, an increase in the number of fish. And so again, it might be nice for me to be more detailed about exactly how the food limitations work, but for simplicity here, just to keep things as just a simple CLD, I'm just going to have number of fish to deaths per year. That is going to be a positive link. And so I right click on this, do a positive. I want to put it on the outside. Now, the return link from deaths per year feeding back to number of fish, that is going to be a little bit different here, because now if I increase the deaths per year, that will decrease the number of fish. They move in an opposite direction. So this one here is going to be either a minus or an O for opposite. So I'm going to label it as a minus, since everything else is pluses and minuses. Now here, I might not want it to be blue like the rest of them. So for the line color, I can click on the color guy here, and I can say maybe I want the line to be red. Now, that's not going to change the text to be red on the label. If I want the label, the minus sign, to also be red, I have to click on this font, and then under its color, I can select red. And I could also maybe change its size. Maybe I'll increase the size a little bit because minus signs always kind of look small. And I'll put the handle on the outside. So there we go. Got my red link. Okay, so the last thing I need to do with this causal loop diagram is label the loops, whether they're positive loops or reinforcing loops or negative loops or balancing loops. So if I go to the comment here, I can click anywhere on the canvas to put a comment. So I'll put right in the middle here. And then this loop is moving in the counterclockwise direction. So I want to create a little loop counter kind of annotation that shows this, kind of indicates that I'm annotating the counterclockwise loop. Any text that I put under this comment box is going to show up by default in the middle. So if I want to, I can put it above the loop. So I don't put anything there, but if I want to, I could put something like regeneration there. So so let's just type in regeneration, and we're going to say put it above the loop. Inside the little loop annotation, then I'm going to select, I want to do an image of a plus. It, for some reason, sometimes switches back to a minus when an image of a plus. So now I've got loop counterclockwise, regeneration above with a plus. Let's see what that looks like. Puts the regeneration up top. It puts the plus in the middle here, and it's got the little counterclockwise annotation here. It's in black. Now, if I will grab this handle, I can, if I'm not careful, I can move it around. But if I actually am careful to grab the handle, I can drag it down. And in old Sketch, it kind of disappears while you do this sometimes. But if I let go, I can see I can make that bigger. And then I can also make it smaller. So I can grab it and then try to make it smaller. Now, if I don't like that this loop annotation is black, I can right click on that. And I could go to the color and I could say, make it blue. And there you go. Now you can get rid of this regeneration text and it'll just have the plus there, and that's totally fine. But if I don't select the above here, if I were to leave it at its default or to set it at center, then it tries to put the text in the middle there. And depending on how much room is in the middle, then you may not be able, it may be totally trapped underneath the image. So if you've got an image in the middle, you probably don't want to put text in the middle. That's why I'm going to do this above here. And then make this smaller. All right, so now all I need to do is do the negative. So I'm going to click here. I am going to put an image in the center of a minus sign. I am going to do a loop clockwise for this one because it's going clockwise. I'll add an annotation that says maybe limitation, and I'll do it above. And then the color of the annotation, I'll maybe make red. And I can drag that around, or I can make this bigger or smaller by grabbing the handle. So there we go. So that's my completed causal loop diagram. Now it's in Vensim. How do I get it out into a report that I want to use? So I actually use a CLD to communicate to someone. Now, one thing you could do is a screen capture, and that's usually okay to do. The downside with the screen capture is sometimes the background in Vensim might not match the background of whatever you're pasting it into. The other more important thing is if you're to zoom in or zoom out on the diagram, let's say you're projecting up on a PowerPoint, if you do a screenshot, then sometimes it can get a little pixely as you zoom in on certain of these elements. So instead of that, what I highly recommend doing is clicking on the Move Size tool, and then just left clicking anywhere and then dragging a box around this thing, and then selecting everything. And then from here, going to the copy tool, clicking that, or going up to edit and then copy. And then you can go into any other application like Microsoft Word here. And I can then go to its edit and then paste in. And then I get a nice image here. And by doing it that way, this is actually stored in the clipboard as what they call a vector graphic, which means that if I zoom in, then everything still looks smooth. It never is going to get pixely. And so it makes it a very high quality image for you to use. So it is much better to use the copy that's actually built into Vensim to do these copies to export out into things like PowerPoint and Word and so on. All right, so the last features that I want to show you is what if you wanted to batch edit a bunch of colors. So this works better in New Sketch, but there's still an option to batch edit a bunch of things in these old Sketch. And so let's say, for example, I wanted to make everything in the regeneration loop. I wanted to make those lines. I didn't want to color them blue. I wanted to make them a slightly different color. Well, I can highlight using that lock sketch, the move size. I can highlight just these things that are participating in the left loop. And then down here at the bottom, if I mouse over these things, I eventually will get a tooltip which will tell me what they are. And so let me make this a little smaller so you can see the tooltip as well. So when I mouse over this thing that's blue, it says set color on selected arrows. So now I can click on this and I can say, I want those arrows actually to be this color here. And if I then click away, then I can see that every arrow that was selected got that color changed. Now notice that the annotations didn't get changed, just the arrows got changed. So if I select all of these things here, I might say, well, I want the text color to change too. Well, if I mouse over this, eventually I will find the box with a tooltip here that says, this says set color on selected bars. Well, those are the auxiliary variables. And so if I were to change those to this color here, then click away, then I'd see that the this new fish per year and the number of fish and the regeneration annotation all got changed, but this label didn't get changed here. So so this gives you these different ways to change different aspects here, but it's not perfect. It does help if you want to change a bunch of things, but what I don't like about it is it doesn't do what they do in New Sketch is I can actually go to the move size and I can click on one link, and then I can hold down the shift key and click on another link. and it will then select both of those simultaneously. And so it allows me to very quickly select multiple elements that don't all have to live inside a rectangular box. And so that makes it much easier for me to select a bunch of things and then change their properties. They also have made things a little bit quicker down here, where I can change the color of a line and the color of all its labels all at once, as opposed to try to like do this like, well, I'm going to change some lines and I'm going to change text and so on. So New Sketch makes these things a lot easier, which is one of the reasons why I prefer using New Sketch. But if you're having problems using New Sketch and you need to use Old Sketch, you really can do all the same stuff. Old Sketch is a perfectly fine way to do things in Vensim. And it doesn't actually look that bad, I think, across the top here. New Sketch is a little bit more modern, but Old Sketch still works just as well. Well, that's all I've got for you. If, again, you're looking for stock and flow diagrams to actually do the system dynamics modeling simulations, then I've got another video on that for Vensim, as well as tools like Insight Maker. Meanwhile, happy modeling, and we'll see you next time.